The great hall of the Frost Dominion was silent, as if even sound feared to move. Blue-white light shimmered across the walls made of eternal ice, casting ghostly reflections of the nobles who stood lined up in perfect rows. Their breaths turned into small clouds of frost that hung in the air. Nobody dared to speak. Nobody dared to move. At the end of the long frozen hall stood Princess Lyra of the Frost Dominion. Her name alone made entire fleets tremble. She was said to be born from the heart of a dying glacier, a being of perfect calm and perfect cold. Her skin was pale like snow under starlight. Her eyes, deep icy blue, seemed to hold the silence of centuries. Even the air around her shimmered with frost whenever she breathed. She was beautiful, yes, but her beauty was the kind that burned if touched. She stepped forward, the heels of her boots echoing against the crystal floor. The sound was sharp, clear, and lonely. Her court bowed deeply, their heads almost touching the ground, but she hardly noticed. She moved like a queen trapped inside a dream, her face calm, her thoughts hidden behind layers of winter. Everyone said she had no emotions left. They said her heart was frozen long ago, that she had never laughed, never cried. No one had ever seen her smile. Her empire of ice stretched across 100 frozen moons, her armies unmatched, her fleets untouchable. Yet behind that power she was empty, like a statue carved from frost. The Frost Princess did not need warmth. That was what everyone believed, but then it happened. As she crossed the throne room, something unexpected brushed the air. It was soft, barely there, like a whisper that did not belong in this frozen world. Her step faltered for the first time in years. The icy wind paused, the crystals in the hall shimmered strangely, and the nobles glanced at one another, confused. A scent had drifted through the air. It was warm, alive, and completely out of place. It smelled faintly of smoke, metal, and human skin, a scent that didn't belong to her people or her world. It was a memory made solid in the air, a memory she had buried long ago deep beneath the cold walls of her heart. Her hand trembled. The frost on her fingertips cracked and fell to the floor like glittering dust. That scent. It couldn't be. It shouldn't be. Yet her heart, the heart that everyone believed was frozen, began to race painfully inside her chest. The air around her wavered with sudden heat as she struggled to breathe. Her guards shifted nervously. They had never seen their princess move like this. Her mind pulled her backward into a time she never spoke of. A time she had sealed away. The day she first smelled that scent. The day she met the creature from the stars. The day a human fell from the sky. It was so many years ago that most would call it myth. Her people remembered only that their princess returned from the frozen mountains, silent and changed. They never asked what had happened there. No one dared. But Lyra remembered. She remembered the fire that had burned in the endless snow. She remembered the sound of a strange voice, rough but kind. She remembered warmth. And now, standing in her icy hall, she smelled it again. Her knees almost gave way. Her eyes, for the first time in a century, softened. Every wall she had built inside her mind cracked under the weight of that simple, impossible scent. Somewhere in the back of the hall, one of her advisors asked cautiously, "Your Highness, are you unwell?" She did not answer. She could not. Her throat felt tight. Her gaze swept across the visitors who had just entered the hall, the new envoys from the Galactic Council. Among them were dozens of species, all strange and different, all wrapped in heavy coats against the biting cold, and then her eyes stopped. There, standing quietly among them, was a human. The air between them seemed to still. Her frost shimmered faintly uncertain. The human stood tall, respectful, but unaware of what was happening. He did not know that the Princess of Frost was staring at him like a ghost from another lifetime. Her heart whispered his name, Ash. It couldn't be him. The human she knew was long dead. Centuries had passed since then. Yet the scent, the same warmth, wrapped around this human like a memory that refused to die. Lyra took one step forward. Every guard in the hall immediately tensed, ready to act, but she lifted a single hand, commanding silence. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was low and trembling, something no one had ever heard from her before. "Who brought a human here?" The words echoed through the chamber like cracks spreading across ice. No one answered. No one dared. She turned her eyes toward the man again, her breath soft and white. Deep inside her chest, under the centuries of ice, something began to melt. For the first time in 100 years, the Princess of Frost felt warmth. The memory came back like a dream, one that hurt too much to remember, but too precious to forget. Long before the Frost Dominion became a name whispered across the stars, there was only endless white. Storms that never stopped, ice that could swallow whole cities, and a young princess who wandered too far from the safety of her palace walls. That young princess was Lyra, not yet the cold ruler the galaxy feared. Back then, she was curious and restless, her heart full of questions her tutors never answered. She wanted to see the real world, the mountains, the storms, the frozen valleys beyond the royal domes. And on that day, she saw something fall from the sky. A fireball tore through the gray clouds, burning brighter than any sun her people had ever seen. It screamed across the horizon and crashed into the glaciers beyond the capital. The explosion painted the sky orange and gold, colors her world had never known. She did not wait for her guards. She ran. Through snow and storm she ran, her cloak whipping behind her, her lungs burning from the cold. Her instincts said it was dangerous, but something deep inside whispered, "Go, you must see it." When she reached the crash site, the world was quiet again. The snow hissed around a half-buried ship made of metal she had never seen before. It was small, twisted, and still smoking. The air smelled strange, a scent of burnt fuel, warm metal, and something alive. She stepped closer, her boots sinking into the soft ice. A panel on the ship hissed open, and for the first time in her life, Lyra saw a creature from beyond her world, a human. He lay there, half covered in snow, armor cracked, blood seeping from his side. His breath came out in weak clouds. His skin was strange, warm and soft, not like her people's cool, glassy texture. He looked so fragile, and yet when his eyes opened, there was fire in them. She froze, watching him. He tried to move, lifting a small weapon, but his arm fell. The weapon slipped from his hand. His voice came out rough, trembling. "Stay back. It's not safe." His words were strange, but she understood his tone. Worry, not threat. Lyra knelt beside him, her hand hovering uncertainly above his chest. The warmth from his skin shocked her. No living thing on her planet was that warm. It was like touching a star. "You are not from here," she whispered. He managed a small smile. "Guess not." The wind howled around them, and she looked up at the darkening sky. The storm was coming back. If she left him there, he would freeze before dawn. Her mind said to walk away, to let fate take him. But her heart, that small warm thing she didn't yet understand, refused. She lifted him with her own hands, surprised by his weight and the heat that spread into her arms. Step by step, she dragged him through the storm. His breath grew slower. Once he whispered something she didn't understand, a word that sounded like earth. When she finally reached the hidden ice caverns beneath the old mountains, her strength was almost gone. She laid him beside the crystal walls where the cold couldn't bite as deep. The light from his ship's fire still flickered faintly on his face. She removed his helmet carefully. He looked peaceful even as pain shadowed his features. She didn't know what humans were, but she could see something pure in his expression, something her people had forgotten long ago. For the next 3 days, she stayed with him. She brought melted snow to his lips. She listened to him talk in his broken voice about a faraway world with oceans, forests, and golden skies. He spoke of laughter, warmth, and a thing called home. Sometimes he would smile at her and say, "You remind me of winter back home. Cold outside, but maybe not inside." She didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to her that way before, but the war above her planet soon found its way to the ground. Enemy scouts were sent to search the crash site. Lyra heard their ships in the distance, their scanners sweeping through the blizzards. She knew if they found the human, they would kill him, and maybe her too. That night she tried to make him leave, but he was too weak. He looked at her, his eyes soft and steady. "If they come," he said, "stay behind me." She shook her head. "You can't even stand." He gave a small, tired laugh. "Then I'll crawl." And when the enemy finally found the cavern, that's exactly what he did. He crawled to the entrance, raised his broken blaster, and faced them. He fought until the air turned red and the snow stopped falling. Lyra still remembered the last thing he said before he fell. "Don't cry, princess. You're safe now." And when he died, the world went quiet again. Snow fell endlessly the morning after he died. The storm had finally gone quiet, but the world seemed heavier, emptier, as if even the sky was mourning. Lyra sat beside his still body, staring at the strange human who had come from the stars and left so quickly. He looked peaceful, even in death. His wounds had stopped bleeding and frost gently covered his skin, making him look like a statue carved from starlight. His blaster lay beside him, half melted from the fight. Around him, the walls of the cavern sparkled in the soft glow of frozen light. Lyra touched his face gently. It was cold now, yet she could still remember the warmth it once held. That warmth had reached into her, melting something deep inside that she hadn't even known existed. He had called her princess. Though he didn't know her name, he had fought for her without reason. He had given his life so that she could live. No one in her world had ever done something like that before. Lyra's throat tightened. She wanted to cry, but her people didn't cry. Not in the way humans did. Their tears froze before falling, turning emotion into tiny jewels that vanished on the wind. Still, her chest ached painfully as if her heart itself wanted to break free from the ice that surrounded it. She whispered his name, Ash. The sound echoed softly through the cavern, fading like the last note of a song. For a long time, she just sat there. The storm outside howled again, but she didn't move. She didn't want to leave him there alone in the cold. He had come from the stars, from a world full of color, life, and warmth. He didn't belong to this frozen place, yet fate had brought him here just to save her. Finally, when the winds grew too strong, she made her decision. Lyra gathered ice and crystal with her bare hands, shaping them with her power. Her people had always used ice to build walls, castles, and weapons, but she used it now to make a tomb. She built it around him, gentle and careful, as if afraid to hurt him even now. It took hours. Her fingers bled. Her breath shook. When she was done, his body lay sealed beneath a clear wall of frost. Inside, his face looked calm, as if he were only sleeping. The flickering light from her hand reflected across the ice, making it glow blue and silver. She pressed her forehead against the crystal and whispered, "Thank you, my human star." Then she left the cavern, sealing the entrance behind her. She didn't look back. She couldn't. When she returned to the palace days later, her people were waiting with question and where had she gone? What had she seen? What had happened? But Lyra said nothing. She simply walked past them and sat on her throne. From that day onward, the warmth that had once flickered inside her was gone. She spoke less. She smiled never. Her eyes, once bright like the sky, turned colder, harder. The young, curious princess had vanished, replaced by the Queen of Frost, silent, perfect, and unreachable. No one knew the reason behind her change. They said the storms had taken her emotions. They said the throne had frozen her heart. But the truth was buried deep beneath the ice, in a cavern no one would ever find. Every night when the stars shone over her world, Lyra would look out her window. She would stare at the distant constellations and wonder which one was his home. She would imagine him walking on a warm world where the sun kissed the oceans, and she would close her eyes just to remember his voice. Time moved differently for her kind. Years passed like seconds. The galaxy changed, empires rose and fell, but she never forgot the scent of him, that faint mix of smoke, warmth, and life. It stayed inside her memory, hidden but alive, like an ember buried under snow. Some nights she thought she heard his voice in the wind. "Don't cry, princess. You're safe now." And every time she heard it, something inside her cracked a little more. Her people never noticed that the ice around the palace was getting thicker, colder, harder to break. They thought it was a sign of her growing power. But it wasn't. It was her grief, spreading, freezing everything it touched, and so centuries passed. The legend of the Frost Princess grew. Her empire expanded across the void. She became the silent ruler of the coldest worlds. But behind her calm eyes she carried a memory, one that never melted, one that burned quietly inside the deepest part of her frozen soul. Even if everyone forgot him, she would remember, because for one brief moment in her long life, a human had shown her what warmth truly meant. The Frost Dominion had changed in the centuries that followed. Once, it had been only a single frozen planet, but under Queen Lyra's silent rule, it became an empire of 100 ice worlds. Her fleets patrolled the void, Her banners waved from moons and stations where even light moved slowly. The galaxy called her the Eternal Queen, for no one remembered a time before her reign. And through all those years, she remained the same, cold, calm, untouched by time. But deep inside her, buried beneath centuries of duty and silence, a single memory slept, a face, a voice, a warmth that refused to die. The day that memory awoke began like any other. Lyra sat upon her throne of crystal and frost as the chamber doors opened. The court bowed, and the herald's voice echoed through the hall, presenting the delegation from the Galactic Council. Dozens of beings entered, aliens of every kind, wrapped in heavy cloaks against the cold, their eyes filled with awe as they looked around the hall, seeing the beauty of the Ice Kingdom. Lyra's gaze swept over them with practiced indifference. She had seen thousands of such faces before. None mattered, until one did. At the end of the line, half hidden behind his companions, was a human. A tall man, his uniform dark blue, his breath misting in the frigid air. He moved with quiet grace, his expression respectful, his eyes calm and curious. The moment Lyra saw him, her heartbeat, something she hadn't felt in centuries, stumbled. Then came the scent. Faint. Familiar. Impossible. The scent of warmth, smoke and human skin. It hit her like lightning. Her breath caught. The frost around her throne shimmered violently, responding to the storm inside her. She gripped the armrest to steady herself. The hall fell silent. The guards looked at her in alarm, not understanding why their queen had suddenly frozen in place. The human looked up, startled by her stare. Their eyes met, her glacial blue against his soft brown. And in that instant, time folded back on itself. She wasn't standing in her throne room anymore. She was back in the ice cavern, beside a dying man whose last words had burned into her soul. "Don't cry, princess. You're safe now." For the first time in living memory, Lyra spoke without thinking, her voice trembling like a fragile note of glass. "Who brought a human here?" The court looked at one another, confused. The human stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice deep but gentle, "I am Captain Elias Winters, representative of Earth. We are honored to stand before you." That name, Winters. The sound of it struck her like a blade of ice. It was the same name she had once whispered in a cave. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She looked at him, searching as if the truth might be written somewhere on his face. His jawline, his hair, even the warmth in his eyes. All of it carried echoes of someone long gone. Elias blinked, sensing her intense gaze. "Is something wrong, Your Majesty?" The hall waited. No one dared move. Lyra rose slowly from her throne. Frost trailed down her gown as she descended the steps, every movement graceful yet strangely human, hesitant, uncertain. Her guards shifted uneasily, unsure if they should stop her. When she reached him, she stopped only a few feet away. The air around her shimmered, cold and heavy, yet the human didn't flinch. "You're sent," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's the same," he frowned slightly. "The same as what?" She stared at him, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. "The same as someone I once knew, a man who fell from the sky. A man who saved me." Elias tilted his head, confusion flickering in his eyes. "My family told stories about someone like that," he said quietly. "A soldier who never returned from a mission centuries ago. My great-grandmother said he fell on an ice world and saved a queen." Her breath caught again. The hall seemed to fade around her. There was only him and the echo of the past between them. "What was his name?" she asked softly, afraid of the answer yet desperate for it. Elias hesitated, then smiled sadly. "His name was Ash Winters." The room fell utterly silent. Lyra's world shattered. The frost around her cracked, thin lines spreading across the floor like veins of glass. Her eyes widened, and for the first time in hundreds of years, a tear, tiny and bright, slid down her cheek, freezing before it could fall. Her voice broke when she spoke again. "He was your ancestor." Elias nodded slowly. "So it's true then? He really did save a queen." Lyra closed her eyes, her hand trembling as she reached toward him, stopping just short of touching his face. "He didn't just save me," she whispered. "He saved everything I became." The warmth from his presence brushed against her like sunlight on snow. For centuries she had lived alone, surrounded by silence and ice. But now, standing before this human, she felt something stir again. Something she had buried deep, but which had never truly died. It was warmth. It was life. It was him. Living again through his bloodline, standing before her, unaware that his scent had just awakened the heart of a frozen queen. The council meeting ended early that day. The other delegates were dismissed quietly, confused by their queen's sudden change in mood. The frost that usually glowed around her throne had dimmed, replaced by a strange stillness. Not cold, not warm, just fragile. Queen Lyra had requested a private audience with the human. Now, in the quiet of her personal chamber, far from the curious eyes of the court, the two stood facing each other. The room was made of crystal and light. The walls shimmered like frozen stars, and in the center burned a small silver flame, the only warmth in the entire palace. Elias stood straight, unsure of what to say. He was trained for diplomacy, not for standing before a queen whose eyes carried the weight of centuries. Still, he felt no fear, only wonder. Lyra studied him silently. The longer she looked, the harder it was to breathe. His face carried faint traces of the man she had buried beneath the ice. His voice was softer, his posture calmer, but the same quiet strength lived inside him. Even the way he stood, and steady but humble, was the same. At last she spoke. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. You carry his scent. And his name. Do you know what that means, human? Elias met her gaze gently. I know it means we are connected by blood, maybe by fate. But I don't know the story, not the truth of it. Only the legends. Lyra turned away, walking slowly toward the silver flame. Its faint glow touched her face, and for the first time, the human could see how tired she looked. Not physically, but inside, as if she had been carrying grief for far too long. He came from the sky, she began, her voice distant. Your ancestor. He fell from fire and metal into a world of endless winter. He should have died, but he did not. He fought to live. And he saved me. Elias listened in silence. Lyra continued, her words trembling. I was young then, foolish, full of questions. My people told me emotions were weakness. They said kindness would melt the ice of our hearts, and without ice we would die. But he, your great-grandfather, was not afraid of feeling. He smiled even as he bled. He told me about warmth, about hope, about a world where snow falls softly and melts beneath your touch. She paused, closing her eyes. He gave me his warmth, and then he gave me his life. The air grew still. Elias felt something heavy rise in his chest. He had heard that story before in fragments told by his grandmother as a bedtime tale, but now it was real, standing here in front of him, told by the very being his ancestor had saved. What happened to him? Elias asked softly. Lyra's voice broke slightly. He died protecting me. I buried him with my own hands beneath the ice caverns of the north. I built his tomb from crystal so that even time could not touch him. And every night since, I felt his absence like a wound that never healed. Her hand brushed her chest as if she could still feel that ache. For centuries I ruled. I built an empire, forged peace, conquered stars, but none of it filled the silence he left behind. Elias stepped closer. You loved him. The words hung in the air like falling snow. Lyra didn't answer for a moment. Her throat moved as she swallowed hard. I did not understand love then, she whispered, but I think he taught me what it was, and when he died I froze the part of me that felt it. She turned to him and their eyes met, and now you stand before me carrying his blood, his scent, his warmth. It is as if time itself has returned him to me. Elias took a slow breath, feeling the gravity of her words. Maybe it's not time, he said quietly. Maybe it's memory. Some memories don't die, no matter how long you try to freeze them. Lyra looked at him, truly looked, and something inside her cracked. For the first time in centuries, her eyes shimmered with tears that didn't freeze. They fell freely, warm against her cold skin. I had forgotten what tears felt like, she whispered. Elias reached out, hesitant, then gently caught one tear on his gloved hand. The droplet shimmered like a star. He'd be proud, he said softly. You kept his story alive. Even without words, you remembered him. Lyra smiled faintly, a fragile curve of her lips that made the entire chamber glow brighter. He told me once that warmth is not fire, it is kindness. I never understood that until now. For a moment they stood in silencing, a queen of frost and a man of warmth, the past and future facing each other. Outside, the eternal blizzard eased, as if the sky itself had paused to listen. And deep beneath the palace, in the ice caverns where a human once rested, the frozen air stirred. The crystals trembled faintly as though something long asleep had heard her words, and smiled. The night was quiet on Alis Prime. The storms that usually roared over the palace had fallen silent. The stars shone bright above the ice world, reflecting in the endless glaciers like a sea of diamonds. Lyra stood by the balcony, her white hair glowing faintly in the starlight. Behind her, Elias waited silently, unsure what to say. He could feel something heavy in the air, something sacred. Finally, she turned to him. "There is something I want to show you," she said softly. Her voice held both sorrow and peace, like a song from long ago. Without another word, she led him through the long crystal corridors of her palace. The guards bowed but said nothing. Everyone could sense that their queen was walking a path of memory, not of duty. They entered a lift made of transparent ice. It began to sink, taking them deep beneath the surface. The light from above faded, replaced by a soft blue glow from the frozen walls around them. Elias spoke quietly. "Where are we going?" "To the north chamber," she replied. "The place where I buried him." Elias fell silent. His heart pounded in his chest. He had imagined this moment many times since he was a child, the resting place of his ancestor, the man who had crossed the stars and found love in a frozen world. But now, standing beside the queen who had never forgotten him, it felt unreal. The lift stopped with a soft sound. Before them stretched a long tunnel, filled with frost that glimmered like silver dust. Lyra walked first, her long gown brushing the ground, leaving trails of faint light behind her. Elias followed close, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. At the end of the tunnel stood a door made of living crystal. It pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. Lyra placed her hand on it and the door melted open, revealing a vast chamber of shimmering blue ice. In the center stood a coffin of pure crystal. Inside lay the still body of a man, human, untouched by time. His face was peaceful, his hands folded across his chest. Elias froze where he stood. He could not breathe. It was like looking into a mirror of the past. Lyra stepped forward slowly. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, she looked more like the young princess she had once been than the queen she had become. "I come here every year," she whispered. "I speak to him. I tell him what I have seen, what I have done. I tell him I kept his promise, to build a kinder world." Her voice trembled as she knelt beside the coffin. But it never filled the silence he left behind. Elias moved closer. His chest ached as he looked at the man who had once been flesh and blood, his own blood. He bowed his head respectfully. "He would be proud, Queen Lyra. He gave his life to save you. And through you he saved an entire world." Lyra looked up at him with sad eyes. "I thought time would erase him. I thought one day the scent of him would fade. But it never did. Even after centuries, I still remember the sound of his laugh, the warmth of his hand." She reached out and touched the coffin gently. "And now here you are, and his descendant, standing where he stood, speaking as he spoke. The universe has a strange way of bringing echoes back." Elias felt his throat tighten. "Maybe it's not an echo," he said softly. "Maybe it's continuation." Lyra tilted her head, her eyes glimmering. He stepped closer. "Maybe love never dies. It just changes shape, from one life to another. You remembered him and I found you. Maybe that's how love survives time." For a long moment neither of them spoke. Only the soft hum of the ice surrounded them. Then Lyra smiled faintly. "He used to say something similar. That love is the only warmth that can live even in the coldest heart." Her fingers brushed against the edge of the coffin. "I thought I had lost that warmth forever. But standing here with you, I feel it again." Elias knelt beside her. "Then don't bury it anymore," he whispered. "Let it live again." Lyra closed her eyes and a single tear slipped down her cheek, glowing softly as it touched the ice. For the first time in centuries, the crystal coffin responded. Faint cracks of light spread across its surface, glowing brighter and brighter. The air shimmered with a strange warmth. The ancient ice, frozen for so long, began to sing, a soft hum that filled the chamber like a heartbeat. Lyra gasped. "He hears us." Elias looked around, awe filling his eyes. "He never truly left, Lyra. His love stayed, waiting for you to feel it again." The song of the ice grew louder, echoing through the caverns. reaching even the frozen skies above. The world of Alis Prime, silent for ages, began to stir. And in that glowing chamber, Queen Lyra finally allowed herself to feel. The frost within her heart melted drop by drop, into warmth. For the first time in centuries, she was not alone. The next morning, the world of Alis Prime looked different. The eternal storm that had danced across its sky for 1,000 years had grown quiet. The clouds were thinner now, and the first rays of sunlight in centuries pierced through, painting the ice plains in shades of gold and silver. Queen Lyra stood on her balcony, her long silver hair moving gently in the soft wind. She could feel it, warmth. It wasn't much, just a whisper against her skin, but it was real. It was life. Elias joined her quietly. His eyes were filled with wonder as he looked at the glowing horizon. "It's beautiful," he said softly. Lyra smiled faintly. "The ice remembers," she whispered. "When love touches it, it melts." For a while they stood in silence. The world around them was changing, and so were they. Something deep inside Lyra had awakened, the part of her heart she had buried with ash so long ago. Elias turned to her. "Your people must be amazed," he said. "This world hasn't seen sunlight in thousands of years." Lyra's eyes softened. "They are afraid," she said gently. "Change is always frightening to those who have known only cold. But perhaps it's time they remember warmth again." He nodded slowly. "And maybe it's time you remember it too." Her gaze lingered on him for a long moment. "You speak like him," she said. "You have his courage. And his heart." Elias smiled. "Maybe that's why I came here. To finish what he started." Lyra looked down at her hands. The frost that once covered her fingers was gone. Her skin was bare now, warm to the touch. She had spent centuries hiding her emotions, believing they made her weak. But now she realized they made her alive. That evening, the two walked through the palace gardens, a place that had once been nothing but frozen statues of dead plants. But now faint signs of green shimmered beneath the ice. Tiny flowers pushed through the frost like sparks of hope. Lyra knelt beside one and smiled softly. "Do you see it, Elias?" "The world remembers how to live," he nodded. "Because you do." She looked up at him, her eyes shining with emotion. "You humans are strange. You burn bright and short, yet you leave fire behind that lasts forever." He laughed quietly. "We try our best." As the night deepened, they reached the northern balcony, the same place where the human ship had once crashed long ago. The ground was smooth now, covered with crystal dust. Above them, the stars shimmered brighter than ever. Lyra turned to him, her voice soft. "Will you return to your people?" Elias hesitated. He had thought about that question since the moment he came here. His mission was complete. The diplomatic ties were stronger than ever. The Queen no longer saw humanity as strangers. But his heart told him something else. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Back home I was one among billions. Here, I feel like I belong to something older, something real." Lyra's expression softened. "You would stay? In this frozen world?" Elias smiled. "If it means standing beside you, yes." For a long time she said nothing. Then she stepped closer. So close that he could see the faint glow in her eyes. No longer the icy blue of a queen, but the gentle light of a woman, finally free from sorrow. "You remind me of him," she whispered. "But you are not him. You are something new. You are the warmth he dreamed of." Her hand brushed his cheek, light as falling snow. "If you stay, Elias, you will melt this world completely. Are you ready for that?" He took her hand gently. "Only if you promise not to freeze again." Lyra laughed softly, in a real laugh, warm and bright. It was the first time in centuries anyone had heard that sound. It echoed through the palace like music. The wind around them shifted, carrying the scent of new life. Soft, green, alive. Far below, rivers began to flow again, breaking through the thick ice. The planet was waking up. Elias looked out at the glowing horizon. "Looks like he never really died," he said. "He's everywhere now, in the light, in the warmth, in you." Lyra nodded slowly. "And in you." For a long moment they stood together, hand in hand, watching as the frozen world began to live again. The light reflected in her eyes, and for the first time Lyra did not hide her tears. They were not tears of pain this time. They were tears of peace. "The human who saved me once gave me warmth," she whispered. "But you gave it back," Elias smiled. "Then maybe this time it will never fade." As the sun rose higher, melting the frost on the towers, the Ice Queen and the human stood side by side, two souls from different worlds, bound by the same heartbeat of love and memory, and high above the sky the stars shone brighter than ever, as if the universe itself was smiling, remembering the warmth that even time could not freeze.